Hello, everyone. Hi, welcome to Leisrealtalk. All right, let's get started. Wow, we have some old Wumao returning. Okay, well, I leave all of them to you, Chris. Okay, well, let's keep talking about China's economy. Its banking system is running out of cash. On the surface, everything looks calm. Branches are open, official numbers look healthy, quote unquote healthy. Bad loan ratios remain low and liquidity appears stable. But if you pull back one layer, there's a very different picture. China's large and small banks are all bleeding cash, and their real operating cash flow has turned deeply negative. They survive only by absorbing deposits and borrowing from the central bank. And now the crisis is no longer just in the balance sheets, it's spilling into the real world. You probably have heard that China's banks, including state owned giants, are rushing to sell real estate in what's called a bank direct sell. So, why are banks acting like lenders? Why are they acting like landlords? They are acting less like lenders, but more like landlords, right? Trying to liquidate assets before it's too late. Because there's a cash flow crisis and a confidence crisis, all hitting the country's banking system at the same time. So tonight, I'm going to show you what the official data highlights. It's actually all coming from official data. Or the bank's published financial data, and explain why banks selling houses or selling properties may be the clearest sign yet that the country's financial system is nearing a critical point. All right, let's see. The Wumaos are behaving. Yes, so far so good, Chris. All right, okay. They're here. Okay, well, as long as they behave. Now, as you all know, ever since China's real estate bubble burst in 2021, the fallout has been disastrous, right? Major developers collapsed one after another, local financing platforms followed, and a debt storm has been sweeping the country ever since. Companies up and down the entire property chain or the real estate sector went bankrupt, triggering massive unemployment and widespread mortgage defaults. At the same time, China has been heading toward decoupling with the West. Multinational companies are pulling out with both their money and supply chains. And all of these problems are eventually or have eventually landed on one place, the banks. A debt crisis is, at its core, a cash flow crisis for the banking system. So when companies fail, when homeowners stop making payments, when capital leaves the country, all of those hit the bank's cash flow directly. In theory, Chinese banks should have been should have taken a huge hit from the economic crash. Whether there are big banks or small banks, they should be under tremendous cash flow pressure. And many should be bankrupt by now. But on the surface, China's banking sector looks eerily calm. The only major development that we've seen in the past 2 years has been the wave of rural commercial bank mergers. Roughly over 500 of them got consolidated. So it looks as if only small rural banks have been affected. And once they were absorbed into larger ones, the problem magically disappeared. People believe that the large state-owned giant banks are too big to fall. This is what Beijing wants us to believe. And according to the National Administration of Financial Regulations, the overall bad loan ratio is just 1.49%, almost the same as 5 years ago. which would suggest the sector is still healthy. If you look at the official data, like liquidity coverage, capital adequacy, and other indicators, everything looks okay on paper. But we know that's not true, right? If you only rely on official numbers, it's hard to find proof. So I'm going to show you what a Chinese financial analyst did when he cut through the fog and find the truth behind those numbers. So let me give you his conclusion directly. It is that China's big 6 state-owned banks, as well as the smaller joint stock banks, and the large rural commercial banks, all of them are already in a state of real and severe loss. Their cash flow is, in reality, already broken. And in any normal country, they would have gone bankrupt long ago. In China, they're surviving only because everything is tightly controlled from the top. So before I go through the numbers, I like to sum up China's banking crisis by giving you an example. Here's the example. Imagine a restaurant that brings in $1 million a month, but spends $1.5 million. That means it's losing $500,000 in cash every month. Obviously, it can't survive, but the owner came up with 2 strategies to stay afloat. First, he borrows $300,000 from relatives. Second, he sells prepaid restaurant cards to customers, offering discounts to get people to put money into the store. So a group of customers end up buying $200,000 worth of prepaid cards, and these prepaid cards are essentially debt, right? The restaurant owes meals later. So together, those 2 inflows, which add up to $500,000, is enough to plug the month's cash deficit. But the next month, the business has the same problem all over again. If it doesn't control cost, or if it's not able to bring in more customers, and then it will need to borrow more, right? Attract more prepaid customers and trying to borrow more money to meet the earlier obligations. So this cycle forces the business deeper into a debt hole. Eventually, the debt will become unpayable and the restaurant will go under. So this example is everywhere in real life in China now. The idea is that 500,000, in my case dollars, but in China's case yuan, a 500,000 yuan loss is a real 500,000 yuan loss. Borrowing or taking deposits does not fix the business model. It only delays the collapse. That's essentially what's been happening in China's banks. So on paper, it looks like it has enough cash flow, but how much of that is borrowed or deposits from customers? We need to calculate the bank's true operating cash flow to understand how deep the hole really is. So take a look at this cash flow statement from the Bank of China. Make this bigger. No, make this bigger. Yeah. And the red box indicates data for the bank, and the column to the left is the bank's parent company's financial data. Well, we're only interested in the bank itself, so I transcribed the bank's data into the spreadsheet. I translated it into English, so it's easier for you to see. Okay, let me make this. So, my logo is blocking the numbers. Anyway, that's okay. So The numbers, by the way, the numbers are in millions. Yeah. Now, the sections I highlighted in green, shaded in green, uh, represents Bank of China's actual operating income. There are cash from, well, actually, there are the cash inflows generated from operating income. So there are cash from interest, fees, commissions, and other operating activities. So for banks, true revenue comes from lending, earning interest, and charging fees for transfers, settlements, and advisory services. Other cash inflows, there are only deposits coming in or loans from the central bank or other financial institutions. So technically, those count as operating cash inflow under accounting rules. But just like the restaurant example I gave you, they're not real operating cash inflows. They only mask the problem and eventually make the cash crunch worse. So take a look at the red boxes, right? Bank of China's customer deposits increased by 995 million yuan, so nearly 1 billion yuan in the first half of the year. Borrowing from central bank increased by another 423 million. So these inflows are gigantic, and they seem to strengthen cash flow. But again, they're not real business. They're not real cash flow generated by business income. Like the example I gave, they are other people's money. So we should not include them when we calculate true operating performance. And on the expense side, the categories are marked in pink. They're real operating expenses: interest paid, fees and commissions paid, staff compensation, taxes, and other operating costs. So using these definitions, this Chinese analyst pulled the true operating cash flow data for all 6 major state-owned banks from 2018 to the first half of this year. And what the table shows is very interesting. I don't know if you're able to read it, but it's kind of small. Maybe, yeah, okay. Take a look at the circled line at the bottom. It's for the first half of this year. If you look carefully, right, because we calculated the cash inflows and then the cash outflows, and then we derived at the net cash flow. If it's red, it means it's negative. I mean, the bank had negative cash inflow. If it's black, if it's in the black, that means it's a positive net operating cash flow. So out of the 6 gigantic banks, only Bank of China still had a slightly positive net operating cash flow, which is about 10 billion yuan. The other 5 are all deeply negative. In the first half of the year alone, ICBC, the world's largest bank, lost 103 billion yuan in real operating cash flow. And then China Construction Bank lost 91 billion. These are catastrophic numbers. You may notice something odd, because I also compared the first half of 2024. It's the last line in the spreadsheet. ICBC had negative cash flow of 59 billion in the first half of 2024, but its full year number turned positive at 143 billion. So if you the 143, I know it's tiny. It's the number right above the red number, right? Because it's chronologically by year. So yeah, so the first half of 2024 was a negative cash flow of 59, but the whole year was a positive 143. So why? Well, because the bank's biggest expense is deposit interest. So to reduce losses, Chinese banks started slashing deposit rates. I believe it was on July 25th last year. They cut rates, and then they cut it again on October 18th, and then again in May this year. So as a result, the interest rate on demand deposit fell from 0.2% to 0.05%. And basically, it's zero. It's not even 1%. It went from 0.2% to 0.05%. And 1-year fixed deposits dropped from 1.45% to a little under 1%, like at 0.95%. But even these aggressive rate cuts couldn't stop the bleeding. The 6 major banks are below or barely at the survival line, and there's no path back. So now let's do something interesting. Let's combine all 6 banks into one hypothetical mega bank. And when you do that, the trend becomes even clearer. So that's this. Yeah, this is bigger. The combined net operating cash flow peaked at 1.432 trillion in 2020 as the real estate bubble burst. The number plunged, falling to 777 billion in 2023, then to 391 billion in 2024, and to just and then it turned red, right? And then it turned to negative in the first half of this year. So you see the downward trend continued from the positive to a negative, right? Now, deposit rates can be cut much further. They're already at near zero levels. So people will simply withdraw their money, buy other assets like gold or other precious metal or anything they could get their hands on, or keep cash at home. Because at least they have the money under their pillow. Some people have problems getting money out of the banks. So there's no point of keeping the money in the bank because 1, you're not earning interest. 2, you have the risk of not being able to take them out. So that will trigger bank runs. And if one bank cuts rates while others don't, you will see a classic prisoner's dilemma. I cut rates and lose deposits. You raise rates and take my deposits away, forcing me into bankruptcy, right? So we've already seen early signs of these vicious competition happening. So what does that tell us? Well, the banks have run out of moves. All they can do is wait for the cash to dry up. Now, to go further, the analyst also pulled data for the 3 joint stock banks. They are regional banks, but there are also the large banks in China. Shanghai Pudong Development Bank, Pufa Yinhang, Ping An Bank, and China Mingsheng Bank. Their cash flow deficits are also massive. SPD lost almost 34 billion yuan in the first half of the year. Ping An lost 14 billion, and Mingsheng lost 1 billion. Now, Ping An and Mingsheng both sit inside larger financial groups, which propped up um, their bottom line last year, giving them a one-time boost. But no financial group can fight the gravity of a collapsing economy. So this year, the true situation is starting to show or is showing through. Okay, next, let's look at two major rural commercial banks. And here they are. And they don't look good. So they are the Shanghai Rural Commercial Bank and Chongqing Rural Commercial Bank. They're the better performing ones. They're smaller banks, but their numbers are worse. In 2024, they both had negative cash flow, losing 400 million and 600 million respectively. You probably can't tell because I rounded them off. And then in 2025, their losses ballooned to nearly 1 billion and 6.2 billion. Now, rural commercial banks have very thin capital buffers. They simply can't survive ongoing cash flow deficits. If either one collapsed tomorrow, people wouldn't be surprised. And then let's do something that's interesting. Let's treat all these 11 banks as one single bank. Because they vary greatly in size, let's adjust the numbers by weighting them. So here's the weight that this financial analyst assigned. So 60% for the big six, 30% for the joint stock banks, and 10% for the rural banks. When weighted this way, their combined operating cash flow, let me show you. By the way, I don't think the financial analyst got the weighted numbers right, because I recalculated the weighted net cash flow. I think somehow his numbers doesn't make sense. So I will provide his original work in the description, in the link after this live stream. But anyways, this is the number I derived. It shows the same curve, but the numbers, his numbers are off. Anyways, so if you look at this, their combined operating cash flow peaked at 942 billion yuan in 2020, struggled downward to 512 billion in 2023, fell to 339 billion last year, and finally sank to negative territory in the first half of this year. So remember, these 11 banks are the strongest in their respective banking sector. If even they can generate positive operating cash flow, the rest of the banking system must be in worse shape. So that means one thing: China's banking industry is losing money and liquidity. Banks rely heavily on cash flow. Once real operating cash turns negative, they collapse faster than almost any other type of business. And counting on central bank to print money to rescue the entire system is unrealistic. Like I showed you last Thursday, the People's Bank of China has already spent the last 12 months quietly absorbing over 6 trillion yuan of government bonds to prevent a sovereign debt meltdown. So trying to support a banking system with over 400 trillion yuan in assets will require unimaginable amounts of freshly printed money. So people can't even begin to estimate the scale. But this is the impossible problem now sitting in front of the central bank. Whether they print money or not, they really don't have a choice. And that is the situation China's economy faces today. And what are the banks going to do to survive? Well, let me come back. Well, they're selling collaterals for cash. China's banks are now selling homes too. Recently, large state-owned banks like Agricultural Bank of China, China Construction Bank, and Bank of Communications, along with city commercial banks and rural commercial banks across the country, have been listing properties in bulk on JD.com, Alibaba's judicial auction platforms, and other asset disposable as asset disposal sites. These listings cover everything: apartments, office buildings, retail spaces, uh, even factories. They have everything there. Now, think about it. In just a few years, banks have gone from being the financial big bosses with trillions in lending power to becoming reluctant landlords taking over failed collateral, and now into desperate sellers trying to turn those assets back into cash. So these shifting roles reveal not just the pain inside China's property market, but also the chain reactions spreading through the entire financial system. And these properties, whether they're homes, shops, or factory buildings, are all collateral seized from unpaid loans. People call them bank direct sales or bank direct properties. And you see a lot of the regional banks like Lanzhou Bank, Jilin Bank, Tianjin Bank, Dalian Bank, all these municipal banks, Harbin Bank, they're all selling. And then the big state-owned banks are also selling. But compare with the sheer volume listed by the local banks, their numbers looked small. The bulk of the listings came from rural commercial banks and municipal banks. In some provinces, the rural credit cooperatives have listed thousands, even tens of thousands of properties for sale. So according to Chinese state media, for example, the Sichuan rural credit system currently has close to 25,000 properties for sale. Guangdong's has 12,000. Liaoning has 11,000. Guizhou has 9,500. Jilin has 2,400. And Fujian has 600. So, and these numbers just keep going. They're adding. And then data from Alibaba Asset Auction and JD Asset Exchange platforms show that since the start of the year, bank supplied listings, including homes, not just real estate properties, cars are also included. Cars and other assets have increased significantly. On Ali's platform alone, bank direct properties scheduled for auction between November 1st and November 11th, between those 10 days or 11 days, rose 25% when compared with last year, and jumped 78% when compared with the previous month. And so a risk control manager at a regional bank explained it like this. He said, in the fourth quarter, many banks are speeding up asset disposal to recover as much cash as possible before closing the year-end books. Now, one thing stands out immediately. Bank-sold properties are cheap. They are 20 to 30% below market price, sometimes even more. So why are banks willing to take such losses just to dump these assets? Well, the reasons are obvious, right? To have like some level of to improve their liquidity. Now, both mortgage defaults and business loan defaults are rising, while real estate prices are falling. That means the collateral, mainly property, is piling up inside the banking system, and their values are quickly falling. So the banks want to get rid of them before they become worthless, right? And they have so many. This seized assets are massive in scale. And there's a Chinese business portal called 天眼查, shows that by mid 2025, for example, Qingdao Rural Commercial Bank's bad loan ratio in the real estate sector surged from 7% to a staggering 21%. So that's just one bank in Qingdao, in Shandong, in 2025. Yeah, so that means 20% of the bad loan ratio, could you imagine, is 21%. Other banks aren't doing much better. And for real estate loans, the non-performing ratios are, okay, here I have some numbers. Zhengzhou Banks is 9.75%, Chongqing Bank 7.2%, Hangzhou Bank 6.4%, the Agricultural Bank of China 5.4%, China Merchants Bank 4.6%, Bank of China 5.4%, ICBC 5%. So these are high. And also, it takes forever to go through the auction, the traditional judicial auctions. It takes too long. It takes 2 years. And it's clogged right now because of the sheer volume. And so the banks are being forced to find faster liquidation channels. And so doing it themselves is simply more efficient. And here's just some numbers. In June alone, 32,000 properties were listed for judicial auction, but only 3,200 were sold. That's a shocking 10% transaction rate. So even these auctions are not generating any results for the banks. So that's why they're acting on their own, and they're selling these properties at an additional 20 to 30% discount. And so here are some more numbers on the judicial auctions. The clearance rate is 22.8%, and total transaction value is down by 22.5%. Average transaction price is down 12%. Average discount is 74%. So these are the numbers that give the banks the incentive to sell the properties on their own. So would it work? Well, from the policy perspective, banks selling properties makes sense, right? The direction is right. And the response is timely, but the actual results are far from guaranteed, because in a sluggish market, buyers are there are just no buyers, and so failed auctions are becoming the norm. So, for example, many Lanzhou Bank properties have been listed more than 10 times, meaning that they failed to sell as an auction 10 times already. So in many ways, banks becoming holders and now sellers of physical assets is not a strategic choice. It's a forced move driven by their increasing liquidity risk, right? So China's banking crisis is not a mystery once you follow the cash. And behind the official numbers is a system under immense strain. And it's temporarily propped up by deposit inflows, central bank support, and rapid asset disposals. But bank selling properties is not a strategy, it's a sign. It's a sign that liquidity is seriously an issue. And also confidence is fading. So what comes next would depend on how long the system can hold, and how far Beijing is willing to go to keep it running. So we'll continue watching this closely. All right. As always, thank you for joining me on this deep dive. I want to, before I thank people for the super stickers, I want to mention that I released a video, a Yu Monglong video, Alan Yu. That video took me forever to make because it's just it's very emotionally difficult. And also the story has gone from what it was into so many dimensions. Now it has become a metaphysical. It has become a metaphysical investigation. Psychics from different parts of the world speaking different languages are now helping the Chinese investigate what really happened. So it has become um, a superstitious crime story. Yeah. Um, bridging the real world and the supernatural forces. So it's a little challenging, but anyways, I'm glad that I did the video because it needs to be the topic needs to be addressed. All right, so let me see. Let me see what people have. Are the Wumals behaving themselves? Are they're here? Oh, this dumb fum, what I don't know how to pronounce it. He's back. All right. China is internationalizing its currency. Oh no. The London Metal Exchange just banned trading in Chinese currency, right? It's only dollar is being traded in LME, the London Metal Exchange, the world's largest metal exchange platform or trading platform. So, if anything, renminbi is not getting the international exposure it wants to. Okay. Oh, I see some interesting dialogues going on here. I'm surprised that my video about Madame Xi didn't get much view. I thought that people would love to get information on her. Yeah, it didn't get as much view as the video on like Li Keqiang's death or even Fu Xiaotian, the famous or the infamous mistress of Qinggang. Yeah, why do you think people aren't that interested in Madame Xi? I thought Chris did a phenomenal job editing that video. Donald Wong, thank you, Lei, for exposing the CCP's dirty deeds and keeping us informed. Well, thank you, Donald. Thank you. All right. Okay, here's a question from Lily's dad. Lei, there are many sellers, but who are the buyers? Who has money to buy? Good question. There aren't many buyers. That's my point. There aren't many buyers. Even though the price, the banks, the properties being sold by the banks are so much lower. I mean, some are like half. Some are cutting half. But people are still not buying because there are everyone who can afford a home has already got a home. And those who don't have a home still do not have the money to buy one. So there's no market, there's no demand. Yeah. So it's not looking good. Because they have built too many properties. There's some interesting comments. Oh, from Wumao, the Wumao is acting up. All right, well, okay. All right, let's see. Questions? David Lopan. Oh, hi, welcome back, David. The company responsible for the recent bridge collapse, Sichuan Bridge and Road Group, is bidding to take contracts in the Philippines. Thoughts? I made a video about the building collapse in Thailand, yeah, and during the earthquake. And it was the only high-rise building that collapsed during the quake, and it was built by the Chinese. So, and I think it was one of the Belt and Road project. So, any country that's still considering hiring a Chinese construction company to build their buildings or anything infrastructure, you should think twice. It only spells trouble later on. People have shown videos of that bridge before the collapse that the supporting columns was resting was not was only resting on rocks. It was not. It was like it flows. I don't know. I think you can't really blame the construction workers because they're not properly paid. Here's my theory. China will experience, we already see this. China is experiencing massive infrastructure failure and building failures because the old infrastructure and the old buildings need maintenance work, and they have not been properly maintenance or serviced because of one, the lack of proper procedure, and two, the lack of funding by municipal government to pay the people to do proper maintenance work. Not just maintenance, but also inspection. So the old buildings are not inspected or maintained. And then the newly constructed buildings or infrastructure in the past 4 years during COVID are not built according to the right standard. They shouldn't pass any safety inspection. So both new and old buildings and infrastructure projects have problems. So these are public safety hazard that the Chinese people are living with. They include bridges, highways, and even roads, not just highways. Yeah, even municipal roads, and also buildings. They're all problems. The only thing, even the municipal buildings, even government buildings, I question if they're properly built because the workers are not happy, right? So I don't know. It's just they're all public safety hazard to me. That's what I don't recommend people go to China because you don't know what will fall from the sky. It's problems. Okay, let's see. Questions. Okay, I feel so sad for the Chinese people who have only rights to do nothing. I agree with you. Well said. Very sad if you have to live there. Okay, Drusilla, have you heard of the artist Huang Jiannan? Huang Jiannan. I heard he has a painting which he collaborated on with a neon artist in the US. His painting is said to be valued at blah blah blah. Does that sound legitimate to you? It's hyped. I don't think there are. I think the true artists in China are not being recognized for their talent, and the ones that are famous, I don't know if what they have is art. Yeah. So do not spend if you're presented with opportunities to invest in Chinese art industry. Not worth it. They're worth nothing to me. They're all hyped, just like China's real estate. And yeah, Wang Jiannan. I haven't even heard of him. Someone said your followers in the chat need a nickname. That's a good suggestion. D-Glass 2008. I heard rumors of a duplicate, triplicate, and possibly quadrupled serial numbers on yuan notes. How can China be running out of money, especially if all money is digitized? Yeah, there are videos going viral a year ago showing bills showing identical serial numbers. Yeah, because the minting company, the factory that prints the bills are corrupt. They print two sets of bills, one set for themselves and one set for the central bank, and that's the problem we have in China. All right, Turtoy 950. Your Alan Yu video was very well made. Thank you. Well, thank you for saying that. I put in my heart and soul in making that video because it's such a sad story and it's so evil. I have to use the word evil. There's nothing like it. All right, Brian Cobb. May China be able to use its 2.3 metric tons of gold reserves to stabilize their banking system? In theory, that's a legitimate statement. Yes, they can. But in practice, where are the massive amount of gold reserves? Because as much as the central government wants to uh, control this massive gold reserves, but they're in different people's hands and people are not letting go. So you have you have the SOEs that are owning some of the gold, you have military owning some of the gold, you have private citizens um, or different princeling or different red families controlling some of it. They're not giving up. And so who is Xi Jinping or whoever the new leader is to tell them what to do with their gold reserves? So, so that question only exists on paper, and it doesn't happen in practice because people are not letting go. All right. DBBJ2UV. All right, question. Does the CCP even have enough money to wage war? The question is a very good question. No, I think I need to ask a question back. By whose standard? How do you define having enough money? By our standard, no, CCP doesn't have enough money. By CCP's standard, it always does because it can always take money from the private citizens, and it doesn't care if its people is suffering from poverty or hunger. So the enough money statement depends on whose definition you're referring to. Okay. Here's a question from Renderless Character PM. Hello, Lei. Do you think eliminating cash in China was good or bad? It's not good. Actually, there's a trend. Chinese young people are using more and more cash this year. I saw that in a recent report 2 weeks ago. The young Chinese in the recent college grads, and even the college students are resorting to cash more than before. The reason is, one, they do not want their government to track what they buy. Number two, they want to better control their finances because it's so much easier to, use WeChat Pay or Alipay, to buy things. But when you actually use cash to buy things, they have to think. So more and more young Chinese are resorting to cash now, and I think that's a good trend. That's a good thing. I hope more people in the West follow suit. I think we need to go back to cash. And also, some Chinese have suffered during the time when there's power outage. when the apps do not work, what are you going to do when your cell phone run, when no apps work, you still have to buy something. So cash is getting popular in China now. Yeah. Ricky M, appreciate your voice, Lei. Could you please elaborate on your comment warning about New York Mayor-elect Mamdani and communism? I'm genuinely curious to hear. Well, he broke his promises, right? He asked people not to donate to his campaign, but immediately after he won, he asked people to donate. I mean, why? I mean, you won the campaign, and now you're asking people to donate money to you so that you could do your job. It doesn't make sense. It should be the other way around, right? I mean, politicians, they ask for donation during the campaign, and then they ask people to stop donating after they won. But so why did he? This pattern is very problematic to me. When he asked people to stop donating money to him when he's campaigning, that's strange. That means he's got money from other people, that he's well funded, probably from some organizations, right? Not individuals. But then as soon as he won, he asked people to start giving him money. And why? You should do your job. Now that we sent you to office, you should do your job. Why does he ask people to give him money? That's like the first thing he asked to do. It doesn't make sense. It smells fishy there. Yeah. And I think New Yorkers need to reflect on why they send this person to run their city. So that's all I will say. I mean, I'm just picking on his donation. His donation doesn't sound right to me. Okay. Someone said, Lei, is it safe to visit China if you are a US citizen? If you must visit China, I have a fan who is a commercial pilot who occasionally goes to China, and I advise him not to bring his American cell phones with him when he's on his China trip. Or he can bring the phones with him, but do not turn them on when you're in China. Do not use the Chinese Wi-Fi. Instead, use a local phone. If you have to use a phone, use a Chinese local phone. Do not mix your US phone with your Chinese Wi-Fi. It's best not to bring your US phone to China with you. So you ask me, is it safe to visit China? I mean, I worry about the infrastructure. What if something fell from a high-rise building while you walk on the street in Shanghai or Beijing? It's the situations like that I worry about, because you never know when they will happen. Because these high-rise buildings are not properly inspected or maintained, especially after so many multinational companies have pulled out of China. These buildings are empty. The landlords are the banks trying to sell them. So these are all public safety hazard to me. And so that's what I worry. If you're my family, I tell you, don't go. But if you absolutely have to go, I can't stop you, but I would say do not bring your American or Canadian or whatever Australian cell phones with you. Or do not turn it on as you go there. Yeah. As when you are in China. Okay. All right. We had fun. We had fun with the numbers. All right. Lei, is someone pass Z word? Is it true that the Hongqi name of that bridge that recently collapsed translate to red flag in English? Yes. The name is ominous. It's called red flag. Yeah, but Hongqi is a very popular CCP jargon, right? It has a car, it has a limo line with that name, red flag, 红旗, because the CCP is famous for its red flags. CCP itself is a red flag. Yeah, but that name may not be the best to it may not be the best to give to a bridge. All right. Well, thank you. Someone said your topics are so interesting. One of my challenges is not knowing what topic to pick because there's so many things happening in China. What do I pick? What do I talk about? I mean, there is the Japanese. Maybe I'll talk about that over the weekend. The Chinese consul general making threats to the Japanese PM. So there's so many happenings. Maybe over the weekend, yeah, I'll address that. All right, that's all for tonight. I thank you for joining me, and I'll see you on Saturday. All right, bye.